Okay, so where are you? What camera? Sorry. Sorry for the dark background. Um, I am not a professional podcaster or anything of the like. I'm not getting any money for this, but this is a pretty intense hobby that I have. Just following current events, and um, I'm trying to build the muscle of producing these sorts of videos and articulating how I feel about things, and we'll see where it goes. But but I wanted to talk about um, the debate, and I'm going to be critical here of Kamala Harris mostly, not because I want Donald Trump to win. I don't want him to win. I kind of don't want either of them to win, but it seems like only got two choices, and I think we can manage a Kamala Harris presidency better than we could a Donald J. Trump second presidency. And what I mean by that, I think we can. I think um, listen, or not to mansplain. Okay, let me take a step back. I'm sorry if that sounded like I was about to mansplain. I invite you to listen to what I have to say. Um, Now I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, that's right. So politics and politicians have been characterized by what they can get away with. When you eliminate things that politicians can get away with, it makes it more likely that the combination of factors conducive to growth, to conducive to wider prosperity, um, take root by eliminating um, some of the worst scenarios. And when I look at myself in the mirror, that I have convinced myself that I am on the righteous path to doing just that, and trying to eliminate the possibility, or reduce as much as possible the possibility of the worst case scenarios that are presented to us right now with our political situation. As it stands today is September 19th, 2024. And I don't want to make it sound dire, right? I got this like background, dark background and everything, and I don't want to make it sound like that. But also, the military-industrial complex, the war machine, has taken root, has taken grip. The grip is all the way around the Democratic Party, and so I'm not sure that Kamala Harris presidency. If I'm a one issue voter and my one issue is trying to avoid World War III, I think there's less of a likelihood of World War III happening in a Donald Trump administration than a Kamala Harris administration. Although both percentages or likelihoods are uncomfortably high with either of them, you know. In the case of Kamala Harris, I'm worried about the entire economy and governance structures being about who can bomb who and who can spend the most on defense. And you know, that's part of the reason why we won World War II. And so, like, taking the excesses of that after the subsequent decades, taking the excesses of that route to victory. Because the Great Depression was still, it was still firmly grasping the American people before World War II. That the World War II is what got the United States out of the Great Depression. And so that like line of thinking, oh, war is good for the economy, it spurs growth. I think that line of thinking is prevalent in the Democratic Party. And by okay, I got my dog barking. So that's my foster dog Blossom. First time, long time visitor to the show. Or first time, short time. This is like my first video, so she hasn't been a fan for very long. But anyways, I digress. What was I talking about? Oh, the line of thinking that the economy is spurred by military involvement, by all the bombs and it's sad. Try to make it as like, okay, this is how it is and this is what we need to do. But, it's tough to completely emotionally detach, nor would I want to be honest. Because if I become like a freaking I'm worried about becoming a robot, to be honest, and not showing or displaying or having some emotion, human decency of emotions, the emotions that have spurred on humanity throughout the generations and millennia. So that's whatever that is. I want to make sure we keep that, even though, digital revolution and everything is having an impact on how we think in very insidious ways. Maybe it's more noticeable now than it was a number of years ago. But back to the debate. What I wanted to start in terms of the discussion on the debate was this line by Kamala Harris blaming Donald Trump for the breakout of COVID-19.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century.
So that's a bit of a stretch, blaming Donald Trump for the outbreak of COVID-19. But again, this is the art of a politician trying to sell you a story of what is actually happening. And in this case, I'm not buying that Donald Trump is the reason why COVID-19 spread. That's a step too far. The origins of COVID, like a lot of people, it did fascinate me. If you remember back when COVID first happened and the absolute sprint to try to explain it in time frames that were unrealistic, It's like we had become so accustomed and have become so accustomed to instantaneous feedback that how COVID started and how COVID spread across the world, like nobody was like, well, let's try and collect all the facts, and like it was just a race for a narrative. I think we ended up concluding that it was a lab leak, right? Hold on, I'm gonna Google this. I'm gonna effort this 1 second. Yeah, here it is. The Committee on Oversight and Accountability found that mounting evidence continues to show that COVID-19 may have originated from a lab in Wuhan, China. The mainstream media downplayed and even denied the scientific theory that COVID-19 emerged from the Wuhan lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So there's the whole strain of Dr. Fauci and others saying that the origins were from a wet market, probably to hide grants and money flowing through the lab and into the lab. So I was a little, so this is sort of squarely in the Democratic camp of, they sort of fell in line with the wet market idea, but then there's mounting evidence of the lab leak theory. And I found it interesting that Kamala Harris brought up the origins of COVID when she tried to attack Donald Trump for something he tweeted about President Xi.
Let's talk about this. With COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
So to give credit where credit is due, Kamala is correct in calling out the lack of transparency from President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party regarding that period of time, late December 2019 to mid to late December 2020, when the government, the Chinese government, consciously withheld information, consciously intimidated people and doctors from the Wuhan area to bow to party pressure and dogma and party propaganda that the COVID-19 pandemic was not contagious. There's two absolute fucking heroes, i.e. Fen and Dr. Li Wenliang were just some of the most courageous individuals the world has ever seen when they spread the word about COVID against the pressures and wishes of the Chinese Communist Party. So there is definite criticism that needs to happen of the CCP in that regard. But it is what's the adjective? I want to say interesting, but interesting such an uninteresting adjective in that situation. It's just it's bemusing that Kamala Harris would bring up the shortcomings in the Chinese Communist Party and their transparency with the COVID-19 virus without making mention or acknowledging the lack of transparency and lack of intellectual curiosity about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic as it relates to wet market versus lab leak. And the reason I bring this up is one of the reasons I bring this up is a comment that Kamala Harris made regarding some of the weaponry that we've provided Ukraine, the Abrams tanks, the Javelin missiles. And how that has saved Ukrainian democracy.
And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
So this snippet, I think, is revealing in terms of what the Democratic Party and by extension Kamala Harris, what their thinking is regarding how to best contain the increasing number of hot conflicts, armed conflicts that are happening across the world, and ultimately restore peace. How to do that. My primary concern, my biggest worry, is that we're resorting to violence. We're resorting to providing missiles and bombs and instruments of war as a first resort. And it cannot be that. We cannot do that. That is not going anywhere that we want to go. And as a contrast to this strategy, that again, I think is fully baked within the Democratic Party, unfortunately. So to contrast the strategy of more and more weapons, I think there was a couple events that happened in Pakistan and Venezuela that are pretty revealing. So China, the Chinese Communist Party, has ramped up efforts to increase their footprint internationally, through diplomacy and diplomatic tools. And the tool that they have primarily used are loans to foreign countries. And these loans to foreign countries, oftentimes in the developing world, are used to build infrastructure, bridges, roads, ports. And I think this is a good, for more countries and more people within these countries have access to these modern phenomenon that we take for granted here in the United States is a good thing, because it allows people upward mobility. It allows people to increase their wealth. But the Chinese Communist Party has adopted a strategy of predatory loans. And these loans have bit two countries, Pakistan and Venezuela, recently. In the case of Pakistan, China loaned Pakistan billions of dollars to build their energy infrastructure. But the repayment terms, but China is very stringent in the repayment terms of these loans. And the government, the Pakistani government, has not been able to build this energy infrastructure in the timeline to generate returns from that energy infrastructure in order to pay those bills. And that's caused a domino effect in which Pakistani utilities have to increase their prices, and these increase in prices have driven consumers away from the utilities. These consumers are then resorting to solar panels and things like that to produce their own electricity on site. Now, this is a good thing from a climate perspective, from a distributed electricity generation perspective, but it also underscores the sort of underbelly of these loans, because it's threatening the financial viability of Pakistani utilities, of Pakistani government. Due to the terms of these loans. And the same thing happened in Venezuela. China loaned a lot of money to the Venezuelan government, and when Venezuela was unable to pay, or that threat was looming, China demanded that repayment be made in oil. I think it's somewhere up to a third of Venezuelan oil potentially going to China, or at least that's their negotiating strategy is, hey, we're going, instead of you Venezuela paying back our loans, we'll take oil as repayment, which further tightens the screws on the Venezuelan economy and tightens the screws on everyone living within the Venezuelan economy. So this is a financial and diplomatic tool that is being underutilized by the United States. I think there's a way that we can increase our standing internationally, that we can restore some faith in our government, in the American government, and quite frankly, to do the right thing by providing tools, finances, and money to build this infrastructure that begets more wealth and begets more prosperity in places around the globe. But instead, Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party infrastructure, I think, is pushing these weapons, these javelins, these Abrams tanks, and touting their benefits to an unproductive degree. Apologies if that sounded too diplomatic. Linguistic gymnastics there, but we can't have can't continue to back all of these wars around the globe. If not from a moral perspective, then from a practical perspective. Years down the road, if we're continuing to provide all of these heavy munitions, what happens if those same munitions, what happens if we are weakening our position because we've provided so many weapons across the world for a number of years, which is the situation that we're in right now. So by fighting this competition, by adopting a strategy to win this competition via financial instruments, and specifically via financial instruments that are able to build infrastructure that allows people to gain wealth and gain prosperity, I think needs to be our number one option ahead of any sort of explosives. And again, I know I've said this, I feel like I'm a broken record, but the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris I think is resorting to instruments of war as a first resort. And that is a strategy that is not going to work long term. That is a strategy that is not working right now. And by examining the financial instruments used by China in Pakistan and in Venezuela, we can come up with a plan that undercuts the effectiveness of those loans. Because where is Pakistan going to go? Where is Venezuela going to go if not to China? And so they're going to accept these terms of these loans, even if the viability of repayment is dubious, because it's their only option. And we've lost sight of this as a country, as a government. And it's something that we are in dire need of finding again. And the last thing, we're pushing 25, 30 minutes here of this episode. So this will be my last point. Another worry of mine with the Kamala Harris administration, well, with the Trump administration too, is the complete refusal to acknowledge any sort of mistake, any sort of erroneous activity, or it doesn't even have to be consciously, it doesn't necessarily have to be some sort of conspiracy where there's, the motivations are to mislead people. Although I suppose that is one of the possible explanations, although I don't want to go there. I don't want to assume bad intentions like that, because where does that stop? If you assume bad intentions by politicians or by public servants in one regard, like you're seeing you become a hammer looking for a nail, seeing everybody's like evil or immoral or whatever. So I don't want to assume these ill intentions or bad intentions. But I do want to provide a constructive piece of criticism here, that when a mistake is made, and mistakes are inevitable in this line of work, so when these mistakes are made, we have got to admit them. We have got to be forthright and authentic and logical and rational in the way we approach things, because, again, of all of these explosives that are becoming more and more common around the world, and are becoming more and more common around the world because of the decisions we've made in the past 20 years. A clear example of this is our withdrawal from Afghanistan. I don't think there's anyone anywhere who can say with a straight face or with any sort of semblance of intellectual honesty who can claim that our withdrawal from Afghanistan was conducted efficiently and effectively. And when Kamala Harris was asked about this in the debate, rather than admit a mistake, she decided to respond this way.
And we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century.
She handled that question quite well, to be honest. And it's a fair point that we needed to withdraw from Afghanistan. And we've been saying we were going to withdraw from Afghanistan for quite some time. And we ended up doing that. But I think this competition that we are engaged in now and will be engaged in the coming years, in the foreseeable future, we will be successful if we get the details right. It is simpler, I believe, sitting here in my home office as an unelected official who has never held any sort of governmental office. So there is that. But it seems to me that it is much easier to supply some dictum like we will withdraw from Afghanistan. But the details with which that policy is carried out are what is going to determine whether we win or lose. And with the Afghanistan withdrawal, we made a mockery of ourselves. And really, in my opinion, disrespected many of the sacrifices made by men and women in our military. Again, I don't want to be too, what's the word? Bellicose or belligerent, because I am not in the military. I've never been in the military. So to stand here and be like, it is disrespecting our troops, the way that we carried out the withdrawal to Afghanistan, it just um, doesn't feel right to me. But I do believe that, giving away our tanks to the Taliban and leaving our allies stranded without any sort of plan was a travesty and tragic ending to our country's experience in that war. And so by not acknowledging that, I worry that Kamala Harris is going to continue this strategy of selective memory that is extremely dangerous in our world today. So that's it. That's all I have for the moment. Thank you for those who have made it through to the end here. Thank you for attending my TED podcast, my TED Talk podcast. I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking and encouraging and are able to see the hope, the strain of hope that I think is very crucial in how we navigate the next number of years as a country and as a world. So thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of.
A quick logistical note or addendum. I recorded part of this a couple weeks after the debate. Basically, if you're watching the YouTube video where I look like this and it's during the day, I recorded this on September 28th, which is a couple weeks after the debate, and the Pakistan government loans issue that I mentioned did not happen when the debate occurred. So I just wanted to give you that sort of timeline of when I'm recording this, and there is an aspect of bringing something up that occurred after the debate as it relates to the debate. But I figured that was fair, especially with the issue with Venezuela, oil exports being used as loan repayments, because what happened in Pakistan just a few number of days ago is indicative of that same trend seen in Venezuela. So I just wanted to make that clear, that I recorded this a couple weeks after the debate, at least the latter portion of my commentary. Thank you again.